He said I looked different lately, then bit his lip like he wasn't sure if he should say more or just keep it to himself. Honestly, that little hesitation haunted me the rest of the night. It all started a couple weeks ago when I ran into Luke at that tiny coffee shop near my apartment. The Grind, it's called. And it's exactly as indie and slightly pretentious as the name suggests. Luke and I go way back. Kinda like that friend you don't see all the time, but when you do, it's like no time has passed. We were never anything serious, just a casual thing that fizzled out when life got busy and complicated. But now, standing there in line, he glanced at me with those sharp eyes that always read way too much into everything and said, "You look different, man." It wasn't the usual, "Hey, long time no see" line or some generic compliment. It was like he noticed something I hadn't even caught myself. Some subtle change. Something underneath the surface. What threw me off even more was the way he bit down on his lower lip right after saying it, like he was holding back a whole conversation that wasn't ready to be spoken. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but the barista called out his name for an order, and just like that, the moment slipped away. I left the Grind feeling weirdly unsettled, like I had just been handed a puzzle piece that didn't fit anywhere yet. I guess that's the thing about seeing someone from your past. You expect familiarity, but sometimes there's this strange new angle you never noticed before. I spent the next few days obsessing over what Luke had seen in me. Was it the way I'd started dressing differently? Or maybe the little changes in my posture since I started therapy a few months back? Or could it be the way I'd been trying to stop hiding bits of myself, even if I wasn't totally sure how yet? Anyway, it wasn't just a casual glance or a throwaway comment. That "you look different" line felt like an invitation, a crack in the wall that had quietly separated us all this time. And Luke? He never bit his lip like that unless something serious was going on inside his head. I've been replaying that moment a million times, wondering what would have happened if I'd stopped him right there and asked him to explain. Would he have opened up? Would it have led to something more than just catching up over coffee? So here I am, sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open but distracted, trying to figure out what this all means. Because the truth is, Luke seeing me like that, really seeing me, might be exactly what I didn't know I needed. And maybe, just maybe, it's a sign that some chapters from the past aren't finished yet. I wasn't sure when I'd ever get the chance to find out, but the universe apparently had other plans. Because a few days later, I got a message from Luke out of the blue. It was simple, just a, "Hey, want to grab a beer sometime this week?" But after that weird coffee shop encounter, it felt like way more than just a casual invite. I almost deleted it. You know how it goes. Old flames, mixed feelings, awkward memories. But I didn't. Instead, I typed something back. Something safe but honest. "Yeah, sounds good. When were you thinking?" He responded quickly. "Friday, same place as before?" Friday night arrived faster than I expected. I found myself standing outside this dive bar called the Rusty Anchor, a place Luke had suggested. It was the kind of spot where the lighting was dim, the music was a little too loud, and the smell of spilled beer clung to the walls like wallpaper. But it was perfect. No pretense. Just a place to breathe and maybe say things you wouldn't say anywhere else. Luke was already inside when I got there, perched on a stool near the back. The way he looked up when I walked in, there was that same intensity in his eyes, but also something softer, like he was genuinely glad to see me. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes, and I wondered what he was holding back. I slid onto the stool next to him, and we ordered 2 pints, his a dark stout, mine a pale ale. For a minute, we just sat there, the noise of the bar buzzing around us, but somehow not filling the space between us. I wanted to ask about the lip bite. I wanted to know what he really saw that night at the Grind. "So," I said, swirling the beer in my glass, trying to sound casual, "what was it you meant when you said I look different?" He took a slow sip, then set his glass down, eyes still glued to mine. "I don't know if I can really explain it," he said finally. "It's like you're the same guy, but also not. Like you're showing up as someone new, someone who's been through things and isn't hiding as much. It's kind of admirable. Admirable? That word hit me harder than I expected. Because the truth is, I'd spent a long time hiding. Not just from Luke, but from myself. I'd always been the guy who kept his feelings locked up tight, afraid to be seen too clearly. Therapy was helping, sure, but stepping out of that shell felt like walking across a tightrope without a net. Luke's eyes caught mine again, and this time, he didn't bite his lip. He just smiled, a little crooked and nervous. I guess I'm saying I'm impressed. And maybe a little jealous. I laughed, the tension breaking a bit. Jealous? Of me? Yeah, he said, shrugging like it was obvious. You're doing something I'm still scared to try. Opening up, being real. It's kind of attractive. The word rolled off his tongue and settled between us. I didn't know if it was the dim lighting or the way his voice softened, but suddenly, the old familiar spark was back. It was like the years apart never really erased what had been there. We talked for hours after that, about everything and nothing. About where life had taken us, the mistakes we'd made, the people we'd wanted to be but hadn't quite figured out how to become yet. And somewhere in the middle of all that, the lines blurred. The safe distance we'd always kept started to dissolve. At one point, he reached across the table, fingers brushing against mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. My heart did this stupid little jump, and I realized I'd been waiting for that moment without even knowing it. Maybe I should have said this a long time ago, he whispered, voice low and rough. But you look different, because you're finally being you, and I think I've always liked that guy. I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that this wasn't just nostalgia or loneliness playing tricks on us. That maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something real this time. As the night wore on and the bar started to empty, we found ourselves standing outside under the cold streetlight. Luke looked at me like he was about to say something important, and for once, I didn't look away. I don't want to screw this up, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Neither do I replied, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. He smiled then without biting his lip and leaned in just close enough for me to feel the warmth of his breath. So what do you say we figure this out together? And just like that, the past didn't feel like the past anymore. It felt like the start of something I'd been waiting for, without even knowing it. The streets were quiet, the night air sharp with that early spring chill that makes you want to pull your jacket tighter, but also somehow encourages you to slow down and breathe it all in. Luke and I stood there under the flickering street lamp, the city humming softly in the background, and for once, none of the usual walls or defenses felt necessary. I glanced at him, the way his eyes searched mine, and I realized something. This wasn't just a random late-night conversation or some fleeting moment of chemistry. It felt like a second chance, like we were both standing on the edge of something unfamiliar but promising. So I said, breaking the silence but keeping my voice low, if we're gonna figure this out, where do we start? Luke smiled that crooked smile again, the one that's both a little nervous and full of hope. Maybe by being honest. No games. No pretending everything's perfect. I nodded, feeling the weight of those words because, honestly, honesty had never been our strong suit before. We'd always danced around feelings, slipped out through back doors, and pretended like nothing had changed even when everything had. Okay, I said. Honest version. I've missed this. Not just you, but the idea of us. I spent a lot of time trying to fix myself, figuring out who I wanted to be, without thinking about who I wanted to be with. And now that I'm here, talking to you, it's like everything's a little clearer and a little more confusing all at once. Luke laughed softly, the sound warm and familiar. Yeah, I get that. I've been doing the same kind of soul-searching, trying to figure out what I want without losing myself. And I guess part of that is admitting I'm still pretty damn into you. The way he said it, like it was both terrifying and freeing, made my chest tighten. Because this wasn't just about nostalgia or a drunk night out. This was real, messy, and complicated. But it was also exciting in a way I hadn't felt in years. We started walking, the cold forgotten as we moved side by side down the empty streets. Luke reached out and slipped his hand into mine. Tentative at first, but then with more confidence. My heart was pounding, and I realized I hadn't held his hand like that in forever, not without the shadow of doubt or silence hanging over us. "What changed?" I asked quietly, watching his face in the streetlight. He shrugged, squeezing my hand. "Maybe I stopped running from things. Or maybe I just got tired of pretending everything's fine when it wasn't. You looked different that day because you were different." I just never had the guts to say it out loud. I wanted to kiss him then, to close the gap between what we'd lost and what we still had. But instead, I stopped. "Luke, if we do this, if we try again, I don't want to pretend it's easy. I want us to be real about all the crap we're carrying around." He nodded, eyes serious now. "Me too. I don't want to fall back into old patterns. I want to build something new, even if it's scary." We found ourselves at a small park bench, and we sat down, the night wrapping around us like a quiet promise. For a moment, the city felt miles away, and it was just us, two guys who had somehow found their way back to each other. So Luke said, breaking the silence, "What's the first step?" I thought about it, about everything I'd been through in the last year, the therapy, the late-night self-doubts, the little victories that no one saw. "I guess the first step is just this," I said, squeezing his hand. "Being here, being honest, and not running." He smiled, that real smile this time, the one that reaches his eyes and makes me believe that maybe we can find something worth holding on to. "Then let's not run." And we didn't. We stayed there, hand in hand, talking long after the streetlights flickered out, the night turning into early morning. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple, but it was real. That night, Luke didn't bite his lip. Instead, he looked at me like I was exactly what he'd been waiting for. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to be that guy for him too. The next morning, I woke up with my phone buzzing beside me. It was a message from Luke. "Coffee later? I want to hear more about this, not running, plan of yours." I smiled at the screen, that same mix of excitement and nerves settling in my chest. It felt like we were starting something new, but with all the messy history still tucked beneath the surface. We met at a little cafe that neither of us had been to before. Somewhere quiet, with big windows and the smell of fresh pastries floating in the air. Luke was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, casually dressed but somehow still looking like he belonged in a magazine ad. I slid into the seat across from him, trying not to let my nerves show. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "tell me about this plan." I took a breath. "Honestly, I don't really have a plan. Just trying to be more present, more honest with myself and the people I care about. Therapy's helped with that, but it's still hard. I'm used to protecting myself by avoiding vulnerability." I caught his eyes, watching as he nodded slowly. "I get that," he said. "It's terrifying to let someone in when you've been burned before, but I want to be the one you trust to see all of it, even the messy parts." The way he said messy parts made me laugh a little, but it was true. Life wasn't neat, and neither were we. I could feel the tension between wanting to open up and the fear of getting hurt again. "So what's the messy stuff you want me to see?" I asked, half joking but hoping he'd really want to hear. Luke shrugged, the edges of his mouth quirking into a smile. "Everything. The doubts, the bad days, the moments when you want to give up but don't. That's the stuff that makes us real." I realized then that what I'd thought was just a casual catch-up was turning into something deeper, something that mattered. We spent the next hour talking about the things we usually skimmed over, the insecurities, the mistakes, the parts of ourselves we kept hidden. He shared his struggles with self-acceptance, how he'd spent years trying to fit into a mold that never felt right. I told him about my own battles, and how therapy was teaching me to stop seeing vulnerability as weakness. At one point, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm glad we're doing this," he said. "It feels like we're finally peeling back the layers instead of just skimming the surface." I agreed, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the coffee. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't carrying this weight alone. After the cafe, we wandered through the nearby park, the sunlight filtering through the budding branches. Luke joked about how we should have brought a picnic, and I suggested we try one next weekend. There was a comfortable rhythm between us, like slipping into a favorite song after years without hearing it. But even as things felt hopeful, I couldn't shake a little voice in my head, warning me to be careful. What if we were fooling ourselves? What if the past wasn't done with us yet? I kept those thoughts quiet, though, focusing instead on the way Luke's hand fit perfectly in mine as we walked. Later that week, we met up again, this time at my place. I'd cleaned up more than usual, and I could tell Luke noticed. We cooked dinner together, awkwardly passing ingredients, laughing over burnt edges and spilled spices. It was the kind of night that felt like a scene from a movie, but without the scripted perfection. Real, imperfect, and ours. After dinner, we settled on the couch, talking late into the night. Luke's hand found mine again, fingers lacing together naturally. I looked at him, that same intensity in his eyes, and realized I wanted this, to try, to be vulnerable, to risk falling. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. "Me too," he said. "But maybe that's a good thing. It means we care." We sat there, the silence between us, comfortable for once. It wasn't rushed or forced. It was honest. In the days that followed, our conversations deepened. We talked about our futures, our fears, and the parts of ourselves we wanted to grow. Luke told me about his dreams of moving to a new city for a fresh start, and I shared my hopes of finally feeling at peace with who I was. There were moments of uncertainty, sure. Days when the old doubts crept in, whispering that maybe we were fooling ourselves. But every time, we came back to each other, choosing honesty over silence. One evening, as we sat together watching the city lights from my balcony, Luke turned to me and said, "You know, when I bit my lip that day at the coffee shop, I wasn't just noticing how different you looked. I was realizing that maybe we're both ready to stop hiding." I smiled, feeling that same spark, but stronger now. Yeah, ready to stop hiding. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start writing a new story. One where we didn't have to be afraid of being who we really were. Together. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope between hope and hesitation. Luke and I had this easy connection again, but beneath it was this funny, fragile tension, like we were both waiting for the other shoe to drop, or for something to remind us why it hadn't worked before. I kept telling myself to enjoy the moment, but the question lingered. Could we really make this work now? One Thursday evening, Luke surprised me by showing up at my door with 2 tickets in hand. "Thought we could use a distraction," he said, grinning like a kid who just scored the last slice of pizza. It was for a small indie film playing at the local theater, one that promised awkward moments, sharp dialogue, and a plot that sounded oddly familiar. I smiled and let him in, feeling that weird mix of excitement and nerves that always came with spending time together. The theater was nearly empty when we got there, the dim lighting making everything feel intimate and kind of electric. We sat close, our shoulders touching, fingers brushing a little more than by accident. The movie opened, and I found myself stealing glances at Luke, noticing the way his eyes caught the light or how he bit his lip when the story got intense. At some point during a quiet scene, he leaned in and whispered, "You really have changed. Not just the surface stuff. You seem lighter." It wasn't a question, but I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell him how therapy was teaching me to stop carrying so much guilt, how I'd started to accept parts of myself I'd shoved down for years. But instead, I just nodded, feeling that warmth in my chest again. After the movie, we wandered out into the night, the cool air crisp against our skin. We didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of unspoken promises. A few days later, we decided to take that picnic Luke had joked about. We met at the park, this time with a basket full of sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of wine. The grass was still a little damp from the morning dew, but it felt perfect, messy and imperfect, just like us. We sprawled out on the blanket, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, Luke rolled over to face me, looking serious for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Shoot," I replied, heart thudding a little faster. "Are you afraid? About us? About what might happen if we really try?" I hesitated because, yeah, I was afraid, but I didn't want to give him a rehearsed answer or pretend I had it all figured out. "Honestly?" I said, "Yeah, terrified, but I'm more afraid of missing out on what this could be." He smiled, this soft, genuine smile that made me feel like I'd just been let in on a secret. "Me too," he said. "Maybe the scariest part is admitting that That afternoon felt like a turning point. We weren't just reminiscing anymore. We were building something new, fragile but real. But life, as it does, threw in a curveball. A few days later, I got a call from my therapist that she was moving out of state. Suddenly, the safe space I'd been clinging to was slipping away, and with it came a fresh wave of uncertainty. How could I keep this progress going without that anchor? I told Luke about it over dinner, watching his face as I spoke. He reached across the table and took my hand, steadying me. "You're not alone in this," he said. "We'll figure it out together." Hearing that felt like the solid ground beneath my feet I desperately needed. The next evening, we met up again, and Luke surprised me by suggesting we start couples therapy, if I was up for it. I blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know," I said. "Is that a thing we can even do? I mean, it sounds intense." He shrugged. "Maybe. But maybe it's also the kind of honesty we're trying for. Facing the hard stuff with someone who can help us navigate it." I mulled it over for days, the idea both terrifying and strangely hopeful. I told him yes. Our first session was awkward, filled with silences and stammered explanations. But as the weeks went by, something shifted. We began to peel back the layers that had kept us apart, the fears, the misunderstandings, the old wounds. One night, after a particularly intense session, Luke turned to me and said, "I didn't realize how much I was holding on to. How scared I was to be truly seen." I nodded. "Same here, but I'm glad we're here now." We kissed gently, the kind of kiss that spoke volumes without needing words. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Weeks passed, and with every conversation, every shared laugh, every vulnerable moment, I felt us growing closer, like two people learning how to be a team instead of solo acts. One rainy Saturday, we stayed in, wrapped in blankets and shared stories about our childhoods, our dreams, and the little things that made us who we are. Luke told me about his first crush, this shy kid in his high school art class, and I shared how I'd always been terrified of disappointing my family. He listened without judgment, and when I finished, he said, "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for making it easier." I replied, by then, the fear hadn't disappeared. It probably never would, but it was quieter now. And somewhere under all the nervous energy and second guesses, I felt something solid taking root. A future, maybe. A possibility. A hope. And all because he had looked at me and said I looked different. Because he bit his lip and didn't look away. Because sometimes, the hardest thing is just showing up. And the best thing is finding someone who's willing to show up right back. The months that followed felt like the slow unfolding of something fragile but promising. Luke and I were still figuring things out, still navigating the awkward, exciting, and sometimes frustrating territory that comes with trying to build a relationship rooted in honesty and trust. It wasn't easy. Nothing worth anything ever is. But it felt real, and that made the stumbles worth it. One chilly evening in early fall, we found ourselves at a tiny record store downtown. It was the kind of place that smelled like dust and vinyl, a comforting mix of old memories and hidden stories. Luke was flipping through a crate of LPs, and I was just watching him, the way he got completely absorbed in something so simple. He looked up and caught me staring, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You know," he said, "I never told you, but I used to come here with my brother when we were kids. This place was my safe spot." That caught me off guard. "Safe spot, huh? Sounds important." It was. He nodded, eyes distant for a moment. A place where everything made sense, even if just for a little while. Then, with a quick grin, he added, "Plus, it's where I learned way too much about obscure bands no one's heard of." I laughed. The sound easy between us. "Sounds like you have good taste." "Only the best," he said, pulling out an old Bob Dylan record and holding it up like a prize. We left the store with that record, tucked under Luke's arm, walking the quiet streets hand in hand, the early evening sky painted with soft shades of pink and blue. It felt like a scene from a movie, but I kept reminding myself it was real, that this, Luke here beside me, wasn't a fleeting moment, but something I wanted to hold on to. Back at my place, we put the record on and sat on the floor, leaning against the couch. The music filled the room, and for a while, we just existed in that shared space, comfortable and quiet. After a while, Luke turned to me, his expression serious. "Can I ask you something a little vulnerable?" "Shoot," I said, already feeling my heart speed up. He took a breath. "Do you ever worry that we're moving too fast? Or that maybe we're trying to make something happen because we're scared of being alone?" I bit my lip, considering. "Yeah, I think about that a lot. But I also think that sometimes the best things happen when you're willing to be scared." He nodded slowly, relief and something else flickering in his eyes. "That makes sense. I just don't want us to lose what we have by rushing or pretending." "Me neither," I said softly. "I want this to be real, messy, imperfect, but real." We fell into silence again, the music wrapping around us like a blanket. It was one of those moments where everything felt balanced on a knife's edge, so much hope mixed with so much uncertainty. The following week, Luke invited me to meet his family. That invitation came with a mix of excitement and nerves that I hadn't expected. Meeting the people who shaped someone you care about is always a big deal, but for Luke, it felt even more significant. His family wasn't huge or flashy. They were warm in that quietly supportive way that made you feel like maybe, just maybe, this could be home. Dinner was casual, filled with laughter and stories that made me see parts of Luke I hadn't known. His mom had this way of looking at me that was both curious and kind, and his brother teased Luke mercilessly about old, embarrassing moments. It was chaotic in the best possible way. At one point, Luke caught my eye across the table and gave me a small smile. I realized then how far we'd come, from that awkward coffee shop encounter to this moment where I was part of his world. After dinner, Luke and I walked home in the crisp night air, fingers intertwined. He stopped me on the sidewalk, pulling me close. "I'm really glad you came tonight," he said, voice low and serious. "It means a lot." "Me too," I whispered. "It feels like we're building something." He leaned in, and this time, there was no hesitation, just the warmth of his lips against mine. That kiss wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was steady and sure, the kind of kiss that said, "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." In the weeks that followed, we settled into a routine that felt natural. Lazy Sunday mornings with takeout and movies, spontaneous walks through the city, late-night talks that stretched into dawn. We were learning how to be partners, how to be friends, how to be something new. But, as always, life wasn't without its hiccups. One evening, after a long day at work, I found myself snapping at Luke over something small, something stupid. The exhaustion and stress had been building, and I took it out on him without realizing it. He looked hurt, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to understand what had come over me. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, reaching for his hand. "I didn't mean that. I'm just tired." He sighed, squeezing my hand gently. "It's okay. I get it. But maybe next time, just tell me you're having a bad day instead of shutting me out." His words hit me harder than I expected. The patience and understanding in his voice made me want to do better. For him, for us. "I will," I promised. "Thanks for sticking with me." He smiled, that gentle smile that always managed to calm the storm inside me. Always. That night, as we lay tangled together, I realized that love wasn't about perfect moments or easy days. It was about showing up, even when things were messy and complicated. It was about biting your lip and saying the hard things, trusting that the other person would catch you. Luke had been right from the start. I did look different. But it wasn't just on the outside. It was in the way I was learning to open up, to be vulnerable, to take a chance on something real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. A few weeks later, Luke and I found ourselves back at that little park where we'd shared our picnic. The leaves were turning gold and red, the air crisp, but not yet cold. We sat on the same blanket, quieter this time, just watching people pass by and listening to the soft rustle of the trees. I looked over at him, the familiar curve of his smile playing at the corners of his mouth. There was something steady in the way he held my gaze now, a calmness that hadn't been there before. It felt like we'd both settled into a new rhythm, one built on honesty and patience. "You know," I said, twisting a blade of grass between my fingers, "I never thought I'd get here. Not with you, and not with myself. Luke's smile grew, soft and genuine. Me neither. But I'm glad we did. We fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone so well that words aren't always necessary. Then, almost like a quiet promise, Luke reached out and took my hand, fingers intertwining with mine. No more biting lips, huh? I teased gently. He laughed, that easy laugh that made my chest feel full. No more biting lips. I squeezed his hand, feeling this peaceful certainty settle inside me. It wasn't about fireworks or grand gestures. It was about being seen, really seen, and choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. I'm still a little scared sometimes, I admitted, but it doesn't feel so heavy anymore. Yeah, Luke said, scared is okay. It just means we care. And there it was, the honest, imperfect truth we'd both been learning. Love wasn't a perfect story or a flawless moment. It was the messy, beautiful work of showing up and being real. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting a warm glow over everything, I realized that this, us, was exactly where I wanted to be. Not because the past was perfect, but because we'd chosen to move forward together. And somehow, that made all the difference.